Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we return. Look, we've done a review on the men, and it's time. We still are on the men. It's time to do a review on the wonderful youth players that really are taking, I think, a lot of us by storm. And one man who's always been behind them, always championed them, and I think now it's really coming to fruition after years and years of seeing these guys on the touchline. I mean, a lot of the parents, close to the parents as well, I must say. We've got the wonderful John Wenham over at the White Rose joining us. John, loves you alongside us, mate. How are you, firstly?
Yeah, Ricky, absolute pleasure to be back on, mate. And what a time to do it. I mean, I was at the game on Sunday. What a performance by the boys to get over the line after the season they've had, the amount of games they've played. They delivered on the big day, and I was just delighted for them. And it was a reward for kind of an entire, season's worth of progress. So really, really chuffed for the boys. And what a job Wayne Burnett has done with them this season.
Yeah, amen. Look, I think it's one of those things, John, that whenever we get someone like you on the show, and look, mate, you're a really good friend of mine. I think it's just down to, again, life.
Yeah.
That we don't have you on more. You obviously dedicate so much of your time to the youth and what goes on at Spurs that we don't get you enough on to talk about the men. But I think it really just is so much telling that for all those years of real dedication, commitment you've shown, is this probably the happiest time you've had following the, like I say, the youth of today and the future as what you've always thought was so bright?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of where I think this crop of players are compared to what we've produced, going back 15 years maybe, since we had a group at once, with Kane and Townsend, Mason, Corker, Adam Smith, Tom Carroll, loads of players that went on to have, very good careers. This is certainly the strongest pool and group of players we've had, with expectations high, and rightly so, amongst our fan base, that these players can push on and can hopefully, integrate into the first team at Tottenham Hotspur and become real players for us and give us an identity of players that know what it means to play for Tottenham, that care about playing for Tottenham, and ideally also support Tottenham as well, which a lot of these boys do at the moment. So, they understand it as we do as fans, and, they get bothered when the team aren't doing well, and they want the team to do well, and they've got that little bit more because they're supporters as well. But these aren't just supporters of the club. These are fantastic young players that are all representing their country at international level. A lot of them are the star players at each age group, and we're littered throughout the England age groups now with Tottenham Hotspur academy players, and it shows the great work that's going on at the club. And I think there was a massive reshuffle last summer in terms of some of the work Fabio Parrott did behind the scenes, and the people he brought in have made a difference in terms of the level of coaching now. I'm hearing really good things about Simon Davis, who joined the club from Manchester City 2 summers ago. Although he's tough, I think the players have responded very well to his work, his training, his ethos, and we're really seeing the benefit of that now, and I think we'll continue to do so. Just one thing I think we should touch on now, and it's something that comes up a lot, and I see it, Rick, in replies to tweets and that sort of thing, saying, will Ange give these players a chance? I think for the first season, we must consider that we only played, obviously, the 38 league games and 3 cup games. That was it. There wasn't a whole load of opportunities. There have been games where I think, especially the home game against Aston Villa, when we were trailing by a goal and Jamie was sat there on the bench, and I think maybe he could have come on at that point. But generally, we haven't had that many games to blood young players. We've also had a really bloated squad of people. It's very difficult to turn around and tell Brian Hill, for example, or Giovanni Lo Celso, you're not playing, this week because we're bringing up ex-academy player. But I think over this summer, where we will move a lot of players out and we'll have stage 2 of the rebuild under Postecoglou, I think next season, with the more cup games, now that Ange knows a lot of the youth players as well, and I think he'll continue to see them on the upcoming, tour to South Korea and maybe the friendly against Queen's Park Rangers, there will be that opportunity for those players to really cement themselves in the squad, and hopefully a few of them will establish themselves and others will get really good loan moves. But we're in a really good position in that I think this summer, 6, 7, 8 of the under-21s could go out on loan, and we could bring up 6, 7, 8 from the under-18s to replace them in 21s, and the 21s could still do really well. I think there's a real conveyor belt now of talent coming through, and we're seeing that with the number of players that are even 15, 16 playing up in the 18s already, and are all, playing for England or captaining England and that kind of thing. So we're on the crisp of something really exciting here at Tottenham at the moment. But we've had some great results this season, going with the 18s and winning at Chelsea, winning at Arsenal, the 21s. Opening game of the season this year really set the tone for the 21s. They went up to Man City and beat them 5-0. And obviously, the thing that I find, most intriguing about that and most probably exciting about that is that we're doing it with a crop of players that are mostly from Enfield, Hertford, the A10 Ring Road. They're pretty, locally based players. And you're going up against City with Brazilians they brought in for big money, Argentinian players, So these are players with a core and identity of what it means to play for Tottenham growing up in the area where Tottenham are heavily supported. And they understand about it as well as being really top players.
Yeah, I think it's really good points to make there, John, because I think, like you said, that's the common, reply to a lot of the things you put out there is, when are these guys going to get an opportunity? When are these guys going to get a chance? And you touched upon it there. Obviously, Spurs playing the least amount of games they've had for the last 10, 15 years, in any 20 years, which is, again, remarkable to think, why, for many out there, that's the reason why there has been lack of opportunities, lack of chances for the youth players. But look, John, I think there's only one place to start. And before I do, look, what I will just say is I know we've got a big building watching audience here. For those that are watching this show right now live, you're more than welcome to get your questions in for John. And what we'll do is when we're on the touching subjects, we'll bring them into the show at the given point. So feel free, any question you've got for John on the youth of all different categories, feel free to get them into the show. We'll put them to John as we go through this show. But there is only one place, John, it feels to start. And that, of course, was on the back of Sunday. A really, really special day, I'm sure, for you as a fan, as a supporter, for someone that spent, again, years and years and years investing in, of course, the youth. And that was the fact that Spurs Under-21s enjoyed the dream end to a sensational 23-24 campaign by lifting the Premier League 2 playoff final trophy with a 3-1 victory over Sunderland at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, having finished top of the league phase of the competition in April, goals either side of half-time from the Premier League 2 player of the season, Will Lankshear, before a stoppage time strike from the captain, George Abbott, saw Wayne Burnett's side finish the job against the Black Cats to win the competition for the first time. Sunderland did pull a goal back in the final minutes of the game with Timo Werner crashing in from close range, but it made little difference to the result, with our young Chargers holding on to claim the title. And at full-time, skipper Abbott held the honour of lifting the trophy in front of the thousands of fans in N17, John, of course, being one of them, whilst we also produced and presented with a trophy to recognise our achievement of finishing top spot during the league phase of the competition. John, I eventually got my words out. For someone that was there, witnessing it live, what was that feeling like for you?
Yeah, it was amazing. As I said, I was really chuffed for the boys because they've worked so hard the entire season, and the knockout phase can make it difficult. You feel like you've won the season, and then suddenly you're playing a whole manner of other games that are just one-off ties. And they've been hard games for us. We snuck past Liverpool, really tough game on penalties. Aston Villa was another difficult game, and I knew Sunderland was going to be a hard game. So we'd had two really hard games against them in the league this season. One of which we won with a 97th minute free kick from Harvey White before he left the club. And the away game, we won 4-2. So Sunderland were always going to be difficult opposition. I must give them huge credit for their travelling support on the day as well. I mean, Sunderland must have had 1,500 fans there. For an under-21s game in London to have come down in those numbers shows what a massive club Sunderland are and how well supported they are. So huge credit to them. And I was a little bit kind of pleased for them in a way. They got a goal at the end. So their fans had something, having made all that effort and for those young players to have reached the final, which I'm sure was quite a surprise and quite underdog status for them. But on the day, Tottenham played very, very well. I thought the captain, George Abbott, led by example, really good running in the lead up to the opening goal, winning the ball. Obviously, Will Lankshear did his usual 2 goals. He just sits in that perfect spot at the edge of the box, waiting for balls played across the face. And if you think how Werner and Johnson whack those balls in that space, he does transition very, very well to that position and gets a lot of goals and a lot of success from that. Jamie Donley was his usual self running the show. Tyrese Hall, very, very good. And also, I just want to give huge credit to Dante Casanova. This is a guy that was a holding midfielder, really on the fringes of the set-up over the last kind of 3 or 4 years. And this year, because of all the injuries we've had in defence with Alfie Devine, Charlie Sayers, obviously Maskin Paskowski leaving the club, Brooklyn Lions Foster leaving the club permanently in January. Ashley Phillips out on loan. Dante has absolutely stepped up to play in an unnatural position for the season and has done really, really well. So I think sometimes, when players put themselves for the team before themselves, make no, moaning about that and just get on with the job. I think brilliant. I'm really, really pleased for them.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting there, John, you make those comments, because again, we're talking about a group that have been together for a fair period of time, and they've all, like I say, been really progressing at, periods and speeds where many are intrigued to see much more of what they can achieve. And look, there's loads of, I've got to say again, thank you so much, guys, loads of comments coming into the show for John here. And I think this is a really good, interesting one to start here, John, is MKP asked a question.
Sorry, mate.
No problem at all. What are the other... That's not the youth already calling back, is it?
No.
No problem at all. This is about MKP. What are the underlying reasons why the under-18s and 21s are being more successful, John? Can you put your finger on as to why?
We've just had a really good group. I mean, this group were very good even at the younger age groups. So kind of when they were coming through the 16s, you had a core of a group of George Abbott, Alfie Dorrington, Jamie Donley, Rio Karamayton, and then some of the younger ones like Tyrese Hall and Leo Blacks. They've had a really strong core that have now played together for a couple of years. And obviously they were getting exposure before their time because they were better than the boys that were older than them. A lot of them have now left. They were getting exposure quite young in terms of... So last season, for example, people saw the results the under-21s had and thought they were, struggling. And yes, they were near the bottom of the table, but that was all good experience. This was when a lot of the boys were under-18s players. There were younger lads playing up, and they've taken that experience on board this season and pushed on and shown what promising players they are. But as I touched on earlier, I think it's a mixture of they've made changes behind the scenes and good coaching as well, have led to a really strong group. We've made some really good external signings as well. You look at Will Lankshear for Tottenham to have gone and paid £2 million to Sheffield United for him. It's quite unusual at youth level for Tottenham, certainly. And then obviously, Josh Keeley's been a big success as the young goalkeeper from Ireland. So yeah, throughout the squad, we've just strengthened really sensibly and we've made really, really good signings.
Thank you for that, John. Look, again, like I say, loads of questions coming in. I must just say, and we'll try and bring these in as we can throughout the show. And I will grab John for 5 minutes at the end to ask him on his thoughts of Timo Werner extending his loan at Spurs for another season. I'm sure that has gone down in different ways amongst the Spurs fan base. That is for sure. John, Wayne Burnett, I'm going to ask you about him. Look, we're going to come to Mikey more shortly. But then Wayne Burnett, a man that I think, to be fair to him, has done a tremendous job during his period at Tottenham Hotspur, a man that you studied and you've seen up close, really personal with relation to the job he's been doing there. He said after the game, I'm so happy for everyone involved, for the players, for the staff, for the club. It's a really good achievement for us this season. We're feeling a lot of happiness right now. I'm so proud of the players who have given everything this season. We finished top of the table and we went into a new format with a knockout stage, but we deserve to be in the final. We've had some really tough games, but we've come through them. I'm just so pleased that we've managed to have one final push and do what we set out to do. What kind of job has he done, John? And give maybe a bit of a background as to what he has done in charge of Spurs for anyone that isn't familiar with Wayne Burnett's progression at the club.
Yeah, certainly. So Wayne's been there for a number of years now. He was a non-league manager, really, prior to coming to Tottenham. But the work he's done is, one, incredibly highly respected by the players. Everyone I speak to around the club is delighted with Wayne's work, delighted with his ethos towards training, the sessions he puts on, and they find it really beneficial. But they also really like him as a friend as well. And I think that's really important, especially as a young player coming through and you're developing as an adult as well as a pro football player. To have somebody that's played, obviously a player as well, and has managed in the non-league and has got that football understanding. I think the players have really benefited from that. And I know that, as I said, they all really respect Wayne as a guy. So yeah, he's done a brilliant job. And I think when you consider, even in the lead up to this week, to have lost 6, 7, 8 players that went out on the first team tour, in the build up, in the week to the final, to lose a lot of the star players as well, going to Australia and back, to have just got on with that and then delivered in the way they did on Sunday without any complaints, without any, issues about, players being tired or jet lagged or anything like that. He deserves huge credit, as do the players. So yeah, I think Wayne's done a brilliant job, and I hope that he will continue to manage at Tottenham for the foreseeable future. When in the past we've had managers that have done well, I think principally of our under-18s like Scott Parker, Matty Taylor, they've done well for a season or two and then they've been pinched by other league clubs. But where Wayne's that little bit older, I do hope that maybe he's settled in North London and can see his long-term future working from Hotspur Way for Tottenham Hotspur, because he's done a brilliant job.
John, can I just ask you on the point of the way in which the season finished? I mean, it's a situation that felt could only happen to Spurs, where they finished top of the Under-21 Premier League, and yet they weren't crowned champions. Can you give everybody a background as to how that formulated and worked out the way it did? Because that just seemed very much Tottenham.
Yeah, look, it works for both examples, though, because last year, had the system stayed as it was, we would have been relegated, and we wouldn't even be playing in this tournament this year. So we were fortunate in the change of setup last year, kept us in the division. And this year, obviously, we've come top from the league games you play, but there was a new sort of knockout systems to give more game time and to give more games. And I think that's really important, because previously, the Under-21 league, sometimes you're playing 2 games in a week and they're not playing one for 3 weeks. So these, more games is always better, in my opinion, for youth development football, getting people out there, exposing them to different scenarios, different stadiums, different players they're playing against. So, yeah, it was a different setup this year, but it was challenging. It was difficult, that knockout system. And I was a bit worried on Sunday because I saw, the result in the game against Fulham, where we were in the equivalent of another cup final for the Under-21s and lost 4-0. And where we had played 120 minutes and penalties against Liverpool, Fulham had a week and a half's rest. Fulham were always good anyway at youth level, and we always had difficult games there. But Fulham were ready and waiting for us, and we were just tired, basically. We were fatigued and tired, and Fulham took full advantage and beat us in that one. So I'm glad the boys did manage to get over the line on Sunday and put in such a dominant performance. As I said, with so many of them being away in Australia as well and playing, the second half of that game, huge credit to them for doing that.
Yeah, again, it's really interesting, the reasons behind as to how that league did formulate. And, again, there's a lot of standout players that obviously have taken a lot of plaudits so far during this eventful campaign. One of them, of course, is Mikey Moore. I mean, John, it's a guy that you've followed very, very closely and one that I know many Spurs fans have got genuine higher hopes for. Mikey Moore, tell me about him. How excited are you for this guy's future?
Yeah, look, I don't put praise on these players lightly. I appreciate, praise I do put with the sort of following there is on Twitter and other big accounts down on Twitter. It's it can put undue pressure on players. But if there was ever a player to thrive under that sort of pressure, from how I know Mikey and how I know his family from talking to him at Hotspur Way, and if there was ever a player that deserved the level of praise and the level of expectations people have on him, it is Mikey. The best way I can put it to you, mate, is if I ever talk to any of the other top prospects at Tottenham, they all say in their own words, Mikey is the best. They all say it, they all sense it. The coaches, the managers, it's always kind of felt like that. You've got to remember he was playing up in the Youth Champions League, which is an under-19s tournament, as a 15-year-old schoolboy player. So Tottenham have known for a while the kind of pathway Mikey's on. And he's got it as a mixture of, one, everyone sees the fantastic skills, ball work, trickery, the way he can take people on and beat them, finishing, pace. But he's got the mentality, and that's the key part of a youth player. If you've got that mentality where you are not afraid, not imposed by any scenario, and he's got physical strength as well, on top of all those skills, I just think what a fantastic prospect we've got on our hand. Just to answer Stewie's question I've just seen on the screen, does Mikey just have another year on his contract? How it works is, because of the time he signed his contract when he was just 15, I think, when he signed it, because he's got an August birthday, so he's always at the end of the year of the footballing year. So maybe he was just 16 when he signed it. Sorry, he could only sign a maximum of a 2-year scholarship and a 1-year pro. So his contract is actually until 2026 anyway. But I think what you'll see with Mikey is you'll see him, as long as everything's happy with his development at Tottenham and everything goes to plan, and everything I'm told is that he is happy at Tottenham and loves playing for the club. You also have to remember that Callum Olesese is his best friend on and off the pitch. Is also in the team with him, also plays for England, have both been there since the age of 8. Callum's already on the pro contract. Mikey, when he turns 17 in August, I expect we'll get an announcement of another new contract for him, which may again only be a couple of years, not to cause worry for people, because I think it's the maximum permitted at that age. And then when he turns 18, I expect Tottenham to roll him out on a big 5-year contract. Like we saw with Tyrese Hall, who obviously recently signed till 2029. I expect something similar with Mikey. So I wouldn't worry too much about that at the moment. As I said, he's already agreed with Tottenham the scholarship, which is 2 years. So it was this year and next year, and then into a 1-year pro contract until 2026. So we've certainly got Mikey signed down, and all the indications I hear is that his family are more than happy with how things are going at Tottenham. The pathway provided. You think that he's already made his Premier League debut, made 2 appearances for Tottenham already. Would have gone on that trip to Australia if he wasn't with England in the Euros, and I fully expect him to go on the pre-season tour this summer. And it's something we'll come on to a little bit later, but when we're talking about players going out on loan next year, again, I think that opens up the door for Mikey even more. Mikey will be too young to go on loan next season, so Mikey will do his 2nd year as an under-18s player officially, but I fully expect him to play almost every week for the under-21s, replacing some of the older boys that will go out on loan. And I expect him to be in and amongst the first team squad and making appearances, and especially with the Europa League there and the way the format's changed in that you have an extra set of games and without a group stage, I think there'll certainly be games where Tottenham from a position will hope to have already been qualified and that sort of thing, where Mikey will get kind of full games under his belt, which will be really exciting. But yeah, I think if there is one player that I fully expect to transition, into a first team player at some point for Tottenham, it is Mikey. I think we're seeing at this under-17s Euros, the ability he's got, 2 goals against France, goal against Portugal, unbelievable goal against Spain. He's the star of the show at that tournament. And I look around the Premier League and people say to me, oh, he is too young, he is too young. But Newcastle through Lewis Miley as a central midfielder. Now, central midfield is a tough position to play in the Premier League and Champions League, which he was doing as a 17-year-old. Mikey's obviously going to be 17 in August. So I don't see any reason why, as an attacking wing player, that isn't just going to be drifting in and out of the game and relying on skills and pace, because he's got strength, he's got upper body strength and power, and he's got the ability to influence the game from that position. I don't see why he can't have a lot of first-team exposure next season.
That's great stuff. I mean, look, John, you said it yourself there in terms of the ratio of goals. 16 goals and 9 assists in his 14 for the under-18s. Just again, was remarkable in terms of the level of output from him, as you said as well. He had a 2-week break between games in April where he was invited to train with, obviously, the senior squad under Ange Postecoglou. He was an unused substitute for the games against Chelsea, Liverpool and Burnley, but finally got to step on the pitch against Man City, albeit for roughly a minute. But for him, we know that minute meant the world to him, as we saw after the game from his post, of course, on social media. He picked up a further couple of minutes, of course, against Sheffield United on the final day. And like you said, he's made a tremendous, obviously, scene in terms of, obviously, the international wise, where, again, for England, again, we're seeing what this guy can do on the international stage. And I think, again, when you look at future prospects, Mikey Moore, Bergvall, how important is it, John, that Europa League? Look, I think me and you are very much cut off the same cloth. We want to see Spurs take it seriously. We want them to genuinely go and try and win the trophy. But at the same time, is there, again, just a balance to see if we can get some of these guys game time, which they hopefully can do because of the way that competition is formulated for next season.
Yeah, and it's a competition that we've done that in the past, but not to mention Arsenal. But if you look at the example they set, when that year they brought through Saka, Smith Rowe, and Nketiah, that was a year they're in the Europa League, and they really heavily involved those 3 boys. And that's transitioned to obviously Saka to where he is today, and the other 2 are worth significant sums of money. So the academy isn't always about, we've got to be producing players that are worth decent sums of money. We used to be fantastic at it, and it's something we've let slip in recent years. But if we're not bringing through boys to go on and play as Tottenham Hotspur players, we're at least bringing through boys that can go on and play as Premier League players and top-level players that can obviously generate money for the club. And in this world of PSR and the financial accountability of Premier League clubs, if you're selling homegrown players as pure profit, that can also really help, as we've seen. But yeah, looking at Bergvall, who you mentioned as well, it's interesting what will happen with him. No one really knows. I know people can say how good he is, in terms of what he's doing in the league he's in, but I think we'll only really get an idea from looking at the pre-season games. I think the idea will be that Ange will involve him in the pre-season games. We'll see what level he's at, and he might be a Dele Alli, where we just, plucked out of MK Dons, played the pre-season games for Tottenham, and I think I saw his first game against Real Madrid, and he's nutmegging Modric, and you could see then and there, he's going to be involved this season.
Yeah, of course.
But you never know. It might be that it's just they take a view that after seeing him, the intensity is too much, or the level's too high. I'm not saying it's going to be. Hopefully, it isn't. But that might be the case. And a season in the Championship, for example, on loan will be better suited for his development. I'm not sure. Or he might do 6 to Tottenham and then go out in January on loan. So it's an interesting one with Bergvall. But certainly in terms of our own prospects at the club, I think there are several that can go out on loan. And that will open up the door for some of the younger ones, like Mikey and like Tyrese, to become real prominent figures for the under-21s, but also in the first-team squad, especially in Europe and hopefully in the cup competitions too.
Yeah, man. Look, John, Smudge on the screen says there, in your opinion, John, does Mikey have the top-level pace required in today's game as a wide player?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the goals he scored. Whilst he's quite physically big, and typically the kind of build he's got is like when Wayne Rooney came through at Everton, if that makes sense. He's got a big upper body strength, shoulders, but the goals he scores are like a silky quick winger. And I put that, you look at the goal he scored against France the other night for England, picks it up, beats 4 or 5 players across the face of the goal, and then puts it into the other far corner. He scored one in the under-17 cup final last year against Nottingham Forest, very, very similar. So I think he does have the top level pace, and also something that he can always work on and add a yard. I think we've seen other players develop little bits more of the pace in their games they've gone on. But with him, it is definitely about his body posture and the ability to use his body and create shapes with his body and hold off players. That is why he's so effective.
Superb. Right, John, we're going to take a couple, if we can, of quick fire questions that have come in. And we've got loads coming in from the live chat. We've also got some of them that have come in before the show. So Ray wants to know, after the brilliant result in terms of that, obviously, victory at the weekend, there's going to be loads of calls to put players from the academy into the first team. At what point does the risk to a player's development in a too much too soon way become less than the potential benefits to them and the first team as a whole?
It's really interesting because I'm never of the view that, first team exposure is a risk to a player. I'll tell you why. I remember when Dane Scarlett played away to Vitesse, and people said to me, "Oh, it was a poor showing from Tottenham. We lost on the night, and he didn't get a lot of service up front. He was kind of isolated up there." And I spoke to someone close to Dane after that, a couple of weeks later, and I said, "What did Dane make of it?" Absolutely loved it. To go and play in a 40,000 seater stadium with fans that are really up for it, atmosphere, really loud and vocal in a European night, that can be hugely beneficial as well. And it goes back to some of our loans. People say about Dane's loan at Portsmouth, maybe didn't score as many goals, but he played 40 senior men's games and was around a team of senior pros that have been there, done that, and can, rub off different bits of experience. So whilst, continued and prolonged first team exposure, if things aren't going well, can be bad. And you can lose fans on side. I think some exposure is definitely beneficial. And I think you gain things away from football in terms of your understanding, your maturity, your mentality, and just seeing how other players live, seeing, the discipline they have in their diet, in their sleep, in the way they prepare for games. And I think you can pick up loads from that as a young player.
Another great question here from the Irish Hotspur. And Ray, we hope that answered your one. He said, United had the class of 92. We have our own generation coming through a good chunk of the under-21 squad. Won the Premier League Cup at under-17, under-18 level last year. A lot of them have been tied down to long-term contracts. How do we now get them into that senior setup? We know we've touched upon, of course, the Europa League being one avenue and one angle. And ultimately, what is the biggest hurdle to overcome, John, in your mind?
The biggest hurdle is just to get that opportunity and to get it consistently. There are some players who, I did a tweet earlier actually where I touched on it, where I put that I think if Mikey Moore was given a prolonged run in the side, he wouldn't come out of the side. I think he's that good. I think he has that ability and that mentality. But it's just getting that consistent chance, getting 20 minutes a part of a mixed match squad in a Carabao Cup game away at Fulham or something isn't the answer. It has to be a consistent run of games. And I always go back to, how did Harry Kane get his break? Well, obviously, look, he had the debut under Harry Redknapp and in the Europa League, and then he went on loan and that kind of thing. But it was actually under Tim Sherwood, just giving him a chance. And it takes a brave manager at the time to turn around and say to Roberto Soldado and Adebayor, whatever they did for Tottenham, these are players, that are well renowned and known and on big money, and say, look, I'm picking Harry Kane instead of you. And he picked Harry Kane for 3 or 4 successive games. And that's how you build a player into a squad. But it's about being brave and it's about doing things at the right time. And I think next season, once we don't have such a bloated squad of players, the likes of Brian Hill and Celso I touched on earlier, once we don't have those players, there will be more opportunities to bring in our younger players. And obviously, if they can impress in the Europa League, then they can stake a genuine claim to, for Premier League involvement as well. So I just think this Europa League is actually probably a really good thing for Tottenham for where we are at the moment next year and for transitioning those players. But one interesting point, and I was talking to a parent of a player, one of our better players on Sunday after the game. And he said to me, what if my boy goes out on loan next season, for example, and somebody else stays at Tottenham, and that somebody else then gets opportunities in the Europa League and kind of overtakes his boy? So it is an interesting, you have to, I've always been an advocate for sending people out on loan and playing men's football, but I didn't really think about it from that angle. But it's an interesting discussion point, what if, you're, whoever player this year scoring 25 goals, 30 goals, whatever, and you go out on loan, and then somebody else comes in and you come back to Tottenham and, the loan maybe hasn't gone as well as you planned, or the loan did go well, but someone else has established themselves in the team. So there is also that angle as well. And I wonder if that will play a part in how many players leave this summer on loan or don't leave. It's a really interesting, avenue and topic for discussion.
Yeah, listen, great points on that, I have to say. And it's interesting, just to link into that, Drew N17 asked the question, in relation to next season, would key players on the academy benefit from another season with Wayne, or to go to almost a Wickham, Reading type of football club?
Some of them would definitely benefit from a loan, and let's talk through them now.
Yep.
I think we'll start, moving from the goalkeeper downwards. I think Josh Keeley obviously was at loan at Barnet this year, did really, really well, really good reports, been called into the Ireland senior squad today, which is a huge achievement. So massive credit to Josh for the hard work he's done since arriving at Tottenham. I know he's loved by the coaching staff there, Pat Jennings, and I know Vicario went down and watched one of his games. So it's shown, how highly regarded Josh is. I expect he goes up 2 divisions next year. There'll be interest from League One clubs for definite. Luca Gunter, who's been excellent. I can see there's a question there, Ricky. I don't know if you want to start it from MKP0138. He says, our goalkeeper Luca Gunter was a real standout for me. A few times he made saves where it looked like the ball was stuck to his gloves. Do you think he'll go out on loan and test it? Absolutely, I do. I think Luca's ready for a loan next year. So that's two already. Two of the goalkeepers out on loan, and that will mean some of the younger age group goalkeepers play up in the 21s next year. Moving forward to the defence, I think you're looking at Alfie Devine has to go on a first loan next year. I think he's absolutely ready for a loan. Again, I think League One would be a sensible first step for him. Do 6 months there, and if you're finding it too easy and you're finding it, you're a level above that, then have a recall clause in January and move him to the Championship, for example, for the second half of the season. I think Ashley Phillips.
On Dorrington very quickly, John. I think there was obviously a period where there was questions about whether he would be able to dip his feet into maybe the potential of the first team. I mean, I think it's at a time when Spurs were really, really stretched with their injury crisis. Would that have been too early in your mind, given the fact that you're saying really a League One loan is more sensible for him? Far too early, in your opinion, to be looking at anything beyond that at the moment in relation to featuring for Tottenham?
It's hard to tell because if he was given you only know if they're given the opportunity. Still, to me, on paper, he's our best defender coming through. And I include Ashley Phillips in that. And you think that's a big statement. But just from watching the two of them and what they can do and what Alfie can do in terms of transitioning the ball out of defence and play passes and build the game from the back, they're very different. Ash is built like you've got the physique of a top centre-back and he's more of the kind of sweeper of the two, whereas Alfie is the footballer of the two, and he's got the ability to dictate the game from the back. But I just think he needs that senior run of games. I really do. I think this season he's had a couple of injuries. And I think he just needs a solid run of game to build up fitness levels and ability on the ball. But as I said, he might find League One too easy for him. And after 6 months, they make a decision to move him up to the Championship. But I think he's an outstanding prospect at centre-back. And he's got all the attributes you'd want to see in a modern ball-playing centre-back. So back to your question, I don't know. Putting him into a defence next to a Romero, next to a Van de Ven, that might have been amazing for him. He might have, bounced off that. You just don't know. Until they're given the chance.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't want to take you off track. You were giving us a number of players that you feel maybe should go out on loan. We started from the goalkeeper. We went to the defence. I mean, one name that has come up, which Nick Teff believes is going under the radar, is that of George Abbott. He said, look, he seems to go really under the radar compared to others. Seems very consistent, very versatile. Does John think he could be involved in the first team squad next season? John, George Abbott, how much has he impressed you and where are you with him in terms of his development?
George is always really impressive. He's like a guaranteed 8 out of 10 every single time he plays. He works so hard. He's like a machine clog in the midfield, constantly running. Must cover 12, 13K a game. Gets involved, gets stuck in. His build up to the opening goal on Sunday was absolutely fantastic. George is a really nice kid as well. Really, really like him, from a good family, from Muswell Hill originally. So it's the same area as myself. So I've got a lot of time for George. And I think next season probably a loan would be better for George. As I said, I want him to go out there and play senior men's football. I think he's ready for that. He's got himself back in the England under-19 squad. The key for George is how versatile he is. He's equally good playing as a box-to-box midfielder or as a right-back, which, again, if you're looking at squad options, and maybe, if Ange is thinking, I'm going to keep a few of these boys around, George is an interesting one because he can cover two positions equally well. And if you play in a system that has inverted fullbacks, well, what better than someone that can also play in midfield as well as he can at fullback, So he's got a natural skill set to play in that position. The other thing about George is, I know it's said that he goes under the radar, but George actually made his debut at the end of last season before any of the other, more well talked about players like Santiago or Lankshear or Donley. George came on at Leeds with Craig as substitutes in our 4-1 win at Ellen Road. So George is well respected in the club and well liked, and perfect captain for the club. He embodies everything about this new young group going through. Everything I hear about him, he's a top guy away from the pitch as well. So, yeah, really pleased with George. And
I think it's only right, John, that to the timing of this show, that I ask you about one man that I think someone really get a glimpse of the future when we've seen some really decent highlights of him so far. That's Jamie Donley. There's been some lovely goals that has been scored this season by Jamie, certainly, I'd say, at under-21 level, where I think many are salivating, thinking, why is this guy simply not getting more opportunities? And I think there is a genuine concern that there's a real special player in there, and one that maybe if we don't see this guy feature on a more regular basis, the fear is that he may have his head turned elsewhere. I mean, what would you say to fans that are concerned by his lack of first team football when you see what he's doing at the moment in and on youth level for Tottenham?
Yeah, I mean, Jamie is a magical player. He can do everything, and the way it's all done with a left foot as well just makes it look that more, a bit more exciting. Jamie's, he's a boyhood Tottenham fan. If he wasn't, playing for the club, he'd be sat on a show like this with us guys. You know, that's how Tottenham he is. I can't think of anyone more Tottenham than Jamie. He's a top player. And look, at the end of the day, he has made 4 first-team appearances this season, 3 in the league, 1 in the cup. He's obviously, you know, had that debut away at Man City, you know, rising up with Haaland to win headers at the end. So for Jay, I think if you ask him how he thinks this season went, he'll say he's delighted. You know, I'm looking at his stats now in front of me. You know, he got 17 assists. Now, you've got to remember, Jamie had always been a striker. Throughout all the age groups coming through, Jamie was always the main striker. And obviously, with Will joining the club last season before last, it was determined that to get Will into the sides, and because Jamie is such a good footballer, he was able to drop into that number 10 position and was equally as effective as a number 10 as he was a number 9. So it was to accommodate both of those top players. So with Jamie, I think if you asked him, you know, at the start of the season, would you be happy if you made 4 first-team appearances? Would you be happy if you know, were coming on at Man City away when the games are 3-3? I think he would tell you absolutely yes and would have bitten your hand off for that. And obviously the success they've had as a team, he's continued to do really well with England as well. I think he's got 5 or 6 goals for England under-19s as well as a key player for them. So I think he's had a phenomenal year of development. But he's an interesting one. I don't know whether he'd be better suited by going out on loan next year or hanging around the first-team squad, considering he's already made those 4 first-team appearances. And if you think that Lo Celso and the likes will probably leave, you know, is he likely to get a lot of game time in the Europa League? Well, if he stays around the squad, he probably is. But it's a balancing act and something that his agents and his family and him will have to consider whether he's better suited by doing that or going out and playing, you know, 40, 45 games of football, because I think he's probably good enough that he could even walk in at championship level for a first loan and would be a kind of star player for whatever team he goes for. I think he's that good. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah. John, we're working our way slowly up the pitch. I mean, you're no better than me. If I've missed out any positions, give me a shout, but we'll revert back. I have to ask you about Tyrese Hall. I know one that many are excited about in terms of that young guy's progression. I mean, we'll come back to Tyrese in a second. Matt Gentry there asked, what about Dyo Santiago next season? Possible loan for him? I know, again, one that, let's be honest about it, he's got a sexy name. So the reality is many would love to see this guy break into the first team just on the name alone. But where are we in terms of Diego's progression for you?
Yeah, I think Iago has to go on loan next year. I think he's that year older. He's been at Tottenham for an extra year than a lot of the boys in the group. He's had a phenomenal development over the last 18 months. And I'll be honest about this and say it was only 18 months ago that if he said to me, did I expect him to be released from Tottenham? The answer would have been yes. And huge credit to him. You know, he got a new contract and I was a bit surprised by the new contract, but how wrong I was. You know, he has developed his end game, his pace, his ability to beat a man, deliver final balls to great success. I mean, the number of assists he's got this season and goals, he's developed no end over the last 18 months. And that's a massive credit to him. So I think he'll definitely go on loan next season. I would love to see him go out to an English club on loan. I think that would really benefit him rather than going back to Spain. I'm sure there would be offers back in Spain for him to take him on loan. Obviously, we got him from Celta Vigo's academy as a kind of 15-year-old. And as I said, for the first couple of years, I didn't see it, you know, and I watched a lot of the games and I just didn't see it. But, you know, he's proved me completely wrong and fully deserving of his new contract. And, you know, I'd probably expect if he did go on loan for him to sign another new contract with Tottenham, really, you know, to reward his progression and the faith they have in him. I think Iago's done really, really well.
It's funny that, John, you know, we talk about all these players that seem to have their own progression plan in their mind. But I think, you know, it's just for the first time. I mean, can you remember a time, John, in your period covering this aspect of youth? I know, again, you covered the period where we had the likes of Ryan Mason breaking through, Andros Townsend breaking through. We had that clutch of a group that obviously went on to eventually establish himself as first-team players. Can you remember as many as this, John, that we're discussing about that genuinely feel they've got some really, really exciting futures ahead of them in terms of a core group like this?
I can't, not as many as we've got now, because it's not just the ones that are, you know, I'm talking about with you now. It's even in the lower age groups, mate. You know, we've got these even 15-year-old, 16-year-old centre-backs now that are kind of going away for England and captaining them. There's a whole conveyor belt of talent just coming through, player after player after player at the minute. And so in terms of the move to Hotspur way, and yes, it's taken longer than we as fans wanted, but I think it is genuinely, you know, bearing its fruit now. And we're seeing, you know, I look back at the under-18s the other week, you know, they beat Arsenal. Arsenal have this boy, Chido Obi, who everyone's going to be talking about. He scored about 900 goals this season in his first year playing, you know.
Just only 900. Just only 900.
Every game I saw the highlights, you know, they've beaten Norwich 9-0 and he got all of them. That sort of vibe, you know. And we started a 15-year-old Janai Byfield at the back and a 16-year-old Malachi Hardy. And yes, Chido Obi, he scored one, a penalty, but apart from that, it was completely kept quiet by these two boys, that are going off and starting for England every week, are playing up 2 age groups at Tottenham already. So it's not just this group now I'm so excited about. It's the next lot, with Mikey, with Callum Ese, with Leo Black. We've not even talked about Leo yet. Leo is amazing. Leo is another one who over 18 months has completely transformed his development plan from, again, somebody I didn't see having a long-term future at Tottenham to somebody that now plays as the perfect inverted right back. Is now getting called up for England and starting for England. We've just got a real conveyor belt of talent of maybe 10 to 15 players that you think, will go on and have certainly professional careers, and a good number of them hopefully in the Premier League and even more hopefully with Tottenham.
Yeah, this is a really interesting point that NKP raises here in relation to the relationship Spurs have with other football clubs to loan out players. I think we did see there was going to be something hopefully forming with Bergval's parent side at the moment. Believe me correct me if I'm wrong, John, Joe Gardens, I think you pronounce it.
Very good, Rick.
Yeah, I'm trying. So obviously we've got that relationship there. Obviously we haven't seen it work too well in regards to Alfie Devine. And you have to forgive me, the player alongside him that went out on loan. Was it actually Phillips? You have to remind me. The two that went out on loan didn't really materialise into it being a great loan for both of those players. I mean, can you see, John, anything forming in the background of other clubs at the moment? Or is this one that's a bit more long-term, more in the pipeline that Spurs are trying to bridge this out with other clubs to try and build that relationship over time?
It's certainly something we need to get back to, because when I touched upon that other group, before, it's something I'm sure I've explained to you before, Ricky, but there was a period where, for all his faults, Tim Sherwood as a loan organizer was absolutely brilliant. Okay, he had a period where he got us 4 boys at once on loan at Yeovil, which was Kulka, Townsend, Mason, and John Abika, all at once. All went to Yeovil, all lived together. Like, it was a perfect environment for 4 young lads from Tottenham to go there. 3 of those 4 went on and became 4 England internationals and gained us significant sums of money. So if we can arrange loan arrangements, so even the Plymouth loan, having the 2 boys go together, I think is really big and really good for their development. So I'll be more than happy with, those players to go on loan in pairs and triplets and that sort of thing. I just think it's good for them settling in at clubs and knowing people from the club already. But some of the loans we've had this season have gone really well. So like Josh Keeley's loan at Barnet, I think that was an exceptional loan because it was worked in a way whereby he still trained at Tottenham 4 times a week and then was at Barnet the other days because it's so close, So there are some loans like that I would love to see us local clubs really, tie partnerships with to get players out on their first loans. But then there's even championship clubs. Like I would love us to tap in at Queen's Park Rangers, for example. It's a kind of a place where a lot of players that get released from Tottenham end up every summer. It's their kind of first trial spot is Queen's Park Rangers because of them having Chris Ramsey, obviously used to work at Tottenham, and there's connections between the 2 clubs. But certainly a loan arrangement, like for example, do I think Alfie Devine would be perfectly suited by going to QPR and playing centre mid next year? Yes, I do. I'm sure there's many others that would be good suited by a move to QPR and staying in London so they can stay where they are and there's not too much, uprooting. So certainly more loan arrangements would be beneficial. There was a couple of years back, we were close to doing a deal with the Dutch club Roda JC, but that kind of fell through in the end. And I think as close as it got was Carl Walker-Peters was dispatched over there. We trained with them for 1 session and then was told the partnership wasn't happening and was sent back. So, hopefully we can formalise something else in the Dutch league because we've got to start thinking about Luka Vuskovic as well. Obviously, he's in the Polish league at the minute, but really we want to put him into a top European league next year for his next loan before he can join Tottenham in 2025. So if we can build up a partnership now about where we can put these players, that will be really beneficial for us moving forward. Rick, can I just answer the question from, I've just seen it there. He says, Kitzler M. Dietrich. There we go. So Ramel Carter was the boy wonder. He was the kind of, he was in all the Nike adverts, freestyle adverts, had his own YouTube channel with, 250,000 followers or something at the age of like 13. And then came into Tottenham's academy, having like a huge media profile and presence around him. He was in the same age group as Mikey Moore and Callum, but wasn't offered a scholarship last summer. So I don't know whether footballing wise what level he was up to, but he's now at Hull City. So obviously he left Tottenham last summer. He does a lot of stuff with Rising Ballers as a freestyler and stuff and Nike. but he's now signed up with Hull City. Luca Williams-Barnett, top player, England Youth International, already playing up with the under-18s, and I expect he'll be a regular for the under-18s next year, despite still being a schoolboy player. So he won't even be in next summer's intake. He'll still be 15 or 16, but he'll be a starter every week for the under-18s. I can see that already with his ability. He looks like another really top prospect.
John, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Look, one I have to bring it on to, and look, we are going to come back to Tyrese Hall, bless him. We really, really are very, very shortly. Have to ask you about, if I can, Will Lankshear, a guy that, again, probably star of the show on Sunday to some degree, couple of goals for him as well. I'd want to ask you, John, because again, when this guy was brought in, I think there was genuine high hopes behind the scenes about what this guy could go on to achieve. But look, just to put it in perspective, he was named the Premier League 2 Player of the Season. He netted 30 goals across all competitions prior to the final. And I think no doubt about it, people are getting excited about this guy's genuine potential. He was interviewed after the game by Ali Gold, friend of the show, in which he said he admires Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. He said Harry Kane is unbelievable, Haaland as well. I really admire them too. They're similar to me in many ways, but obviously, if I could have the quarter of the career, I'd be very, very happy. I said from his perspective, there's been a real mentality switch from the very first day this year. We've been on it. That's down to the staff. They've really nailed that into us in terms of getting to grips with this competition and getting over the line. It's a guy that John seems to have his head really, really screwed on, really much feet on the ground. Will Lankshear, tell us a bit about him and his progression and what he has done in the Spurs shirt, because I can't believe I haven't got to, 46 minutes of the show and even asked you about him yet.
Yeah, he's going to really, just to give it a context to it, it's been a really unusual career path for Will. So Will was in Arsenal's academy as a boy. He's actually a lifelong boyhood Tottenham fan. So there's a bit, it's an interesting dynamic, but he was at Arsenal. He was released from Arsenal and joined Sheffield United. So, that takes a lot to come out of a Category 1 academy at Arsenal when you're used to those kind of facilities and that upbringing there, to then move yourself one up north, but also to a lesser category academy, and they'll have less facilities and less coaches and that kind of thing. He absolutely smashed it up there, had the kind of season numbers wise that he's now had with us, which obviously alerted Tottenham's interest, and Tottenham to have paid £2 million for him as a 17-year-old was quite unusual. But he's come into Tottenham and just continued this transition of being an out-and-out goal scorer. He can score all manner of goals. He can only play as an out-and-out forward. That's what he is. He's not like a Jamie Donley or a Dyo Santiago or Jude Santiago that can play in wing positions or number 10 and that sort of thing. He is just your out-and-out traditional sort of old-fashioned striker, but he does it really bloody well. He knows where the goal is. He's always in that right position on the penalty box, waiting for balls to be cut back, and finishes them. So he's got a good footballing pedigree. I believe his brother is a pro player as well. I think he was last at Blackpool. So football's kind of drawn into the family. Really nice family as well. And he's just had a crazy good season. He's got a really good link up and understanding with Jamie Donley on the pitch, kind of showing them in Klinsmann style to them, where they read each other's game and quite telepathic. Will's been brilliant. With Will, I think there is because he's signed from Sheffield United rather than coming the whole way through, I think he still has to do another 6 months in our academy to count as club trained in years to come, as well as homegrown. So I wouldn't be surprised with him. I know there's talk about a Middlesbrough loan and that kind of thing, but from a Tottenham point of view, as they did with Alfie Devine, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually stayed with Tottenham until January, until he's completed the total amount of time, which I think is 3 years, in the academy before he went out on loan for the second half of the season. Now, I get that's probably quite frustrating because there are obviously teams queuing up to get him, and I think he'd do well instantly on loan because he's got the temperament and he's got the physical stature to handle it. But as we saw with Alfie Devine, Tottenham aren't afraid to hold someone back a little bit longer, knowing that in the future we don't want to be stuck in this situation where we're handing fourth choice goalkeepers contracts, to keep them to tick boxes. They want players that are genuinely contributing to the homegrown numbers and club trained players, and they're hoping that Will can become that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he stays around for 6 months, whereas the likes of Jude Soonsup-Bell, Jamie Donley and Dyo Santiago Alonso maybe are pushed to go on loan first, whereas Will stays back for 6 months. But that'll be interesting.
Okay. Listen, we're going to try and get in some quick fire questions. Time is always running away for some of these shows. We start with John. We don't know where it's going to end because it's always fascinating stuff we get from John. I've got a list I've got to ask John quick fire ones in terms of what he feels their futures are going to be at Spurs. But Brock asked the question, would love to know what John thinks of Jadon Philogene at Hull. Would love to see him come to Spurs. Believe John told me about his younger brother, Blake, a schoolboy at Spurs. John?
Yeah,
Give us some thought about that one there.
Yeah, Jaden's younger brother is at Tottenham, seen as a kind of standout player in the group, in his age group. I think he's under 14s, sometimes plays up under 15s, but he's highly regarded. And look, if there's a good young player in the English league, David Pleat at Tottenham will be championing the club to get them. He doesn't miss. I put that tweet out. I don't know if you saw it the other day, Ricky.
John, isn't that guy unbelievable, right? His knowledge, even now to this day, his age. I mean, that guy never ages, does he, in terms of his eye for players?
Look, someone told me once that he watches like 3,000 games of football a year or something. Not obviously not all live, but he watches like videos and like the guy's like, if you put an exam of English league players, like, he knows everybody. He knows every under 21 player, 18, 16. Like, there's no one the guy doesn't know. And his hit rate, if we just listened to him all this time, we'd be talking about a Tottenham team now with like Eze and Watkins and Maddison 5 years ago and Grealish.
Crazy.
Like, it doesn't miss. He does not miss. I put a tweet out the other day, and I timely did it after Ademola Lookman scored a hat-trick. And had I put that any other time, people would say, "Oh, Lookman, isn't amongst the list," but he just scored a European hat-trick, so it was time to put it. But yeah, he's just got a phenomenal track rate, and I'm glad he's still employed at Tottenham.
Should we just rip this structure up, John? Just give it to him.
Oh, well, yeah. I would be up for that, as you know. I just think he's done some amazing things for Tottenham, and he was key behind bringing Defoe and Karen all those years back, and many others. Simon Davis and Anthony Gardner, and all these players had different varying degrees of success, but a lot of those even went on and played for their countries. So he just does really well. And even on, as I said recently, as a couple of weeks ago at the under-18s game, he was there and he's on the pitch, and he's still. I believe his role is like a external scout or something, is his kind of off the roll record, but he seems to be involved in everything. You see him watching the 16s games, the 18s games, like talking to all the coaches of local clubs and everything. So yeah, he's just the kind of like Mr. Tottenham, and yeah, his level for finding players. So if Jaden Philogene, I'm certain David Pleat will know about him and will be recommending him to Tottenham, especially if his younger brother at the club.
Love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you about a trio, if I can, of some of the youth stars that we've not touched upon yet. Dante Casanova. I know you've got big love for this guy. Tell us a bit about Dante, if you can, because Dante's progression and what he's done. And for those that don't know about Dante, tell us about Dante to begin with. Tell us his progression at youth level for Tottenham.
He was a holding midfielder coming through the under-18s, but actually found game time really hard to come by, and was out on trial at Derby, I remember, 3 years ago. So I expected his time at Tottenham to come to an end. But he got a bad injury, and that led to Tottenham offering him a third-year scholarship at the time rather than a professional contract. He hung around the club, and he's hung around and seized his opportunity, and fair play to him. It's led to, I think he's been on a couple of training camps with the Jamaica first team as well, which must be an amazing experience. You're getting there and you're rocking up with the likes of Leon Bailey and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, and Jamaica's an amazing place to go to. This season he's just stood up for the team. He's been asked to play out of position the entire year, and he's done it to a really good level. And for that reason alone, I hope that, with you looking at probably Ash Phillips and Alfie Devine both going out on loan next year, I do hope that Dante is given another contract to Tottenham. I think his existing deal is set to run out, unless he signed one already, and I don't know about it. It's set to run out at the end of next month. So I do hope he's given a new deal at Tottenham, because I think he deserves it for the performances he's shown this year, for the always being available, and for always giving his all for the team. And I'm really pleased for him. Okay,
Jude, Suns Up Bell. What's this season been like for you, John? What do you make of him?
Yeah, he's had a really good season. He's had definitely his most productive seasons. Obviously, he joined last year, January. Obviously, he was the kind of boy wonder in Chelsea's academy, and it kind of fell off the rails a little bit for him there, which led to the move to Tottenham. But he seized it with both hands. And I think probably with Jude now, he was definitely looking for a loan next season. He was looking for one at the beginning of this season, really, but got an unfortunate injury in pre-season, and that made the move not happen. But Jude's numbers have been really, really good. He's been playing as the right winger in the team basically all season. I mean, Damola Ajayi started to come in the last couple of weeks, but before that, Jude was nailed on every week to start. It was kind of a front four of Will up the top, Jamie in the 10, Yargo left, Jude right, and they've all been scoring and all been heavily involved. But I think with Jude next year, he's ready for that first loan, and he probably needs another contract with Tottenham as well. So I probably wouldn't be surprised to see Tottenham offer him a 3-year contract, and then a first loan for him next season. Probably League One again, a good starting point with a 6-month break clause. And if he's doing really well in League One, then we can move him up to the Championship.
Yep. I'm going to ask you about Tyrese Hall. I should have really started with Tyrese, given the position I've been trying to go in. But Tyrese, again, a player that I know many have got really, really high hopes for. Of course, under 18 player. Can't help but look at this guy and think there's a star in the making there. How far away is he in your mind, John, from us seeing this guy more regularly? Because I know people are licking their lips when they see these compilations that are put up by rising ballers and
Yeah.
all these. He looks brilliant on the compilations, but so did Nkudu. So I'm a little bit cautious to not go too far.
The thing I'll say about Tyrese is ever since I first saw him, he always looks brilliant on the ball. He's one of those players that you just do enjoy watching, and those compilations for him are a fair reality of what you actually see. You know, a lot of these compilations, they distort the reality, as you mentioned, in Kudu and people like that. With Tyrese, it's a genuine, that's how he looks on the ball, as you see in those compilations. He's always been one of my favourite players just to watch on the ball, the way he transitions the ball, the way he dictates the tempo of the game. He picks it up in central midfield. It kind of glides forward and sets the tempo and sets how the team are going to press and direct from the midfield. And I'm so he had gone under the radar a little bit until this season, but to now see Tottenham reward him with a 5-year contract till 2029, it's just something they don't do. Shows how highly they rate Tyrese. I'm delighted that he finally got called up for England, because I find that with England, unless you get in that kind of under 15s level, it's really difficult to break in later on. And for him to only break in for the first time ever at under 19s level is quite unheard of. So for him to finally get in and finally get the recognition he deserves, I want to shout out his mum, Vicky, as well. A lot of fans will have seen her on Twitter. A really nice woman and really cares about the other players' development as well as her own sons, which is really nice to see. But for Ty, brilliant player. And I know Tottenham have such high hopes for him, and seemingly England do now as well, which is brilliant. So he's another one that, he's probably playing ahead of his time already in terms of that he's only an under-18s player. He's not even officially a 21s player until next season, but he's already the standout midfielder for them. And I fully expect him to next season, be the main midfielder in the 21s and also feature, for the first team in those European games we touched upon earlier. I think the future is really bright for Tyrese, and Tottenham to have given him such a long contract shows how much they value him and how much faith they have in him as a player.
Yeah, listen, fascinating stuff. John, I don't want to take you off piece. So I want to close it in terms of some of the players' futures that are maybe up in the air as to what comes next. Have we covered from your end everybody that has got a plan? Anyone you want to bring in on this point, or have we covered the majority of those players?
To mention that maybe have gone under the radar a little bit. So one is Rio Mason. He's normally a central midfield player, but he's been filling in as the kind of inverted left back for the 21s in recent weeks. And has done really well in that position. So that's really nice to see. Somebody able to transition and add another, position to their game, because that makes them more flexible and makes them more likely to get first team chances. So that's really good. And the other one is Mason King, who stepped up for the 21s over the last kind of 6 weeks and has slotted in seamlessly as an under-18s player to move up to the 21s without any issue. So that's really good for Mason King as well. So next year he'll be looking to make himself the kind of standout defender in the 21s. I'm sure that'll be his task to be the main left back in the team.
I love that. It's fantastic stuff. A great thing, like you say there, John, is there's so many progress plans in place for a number of these players. It will be fascinating to see how the summer pans out in terms of what it is for those players. Look, it would be amiss of me with you here to not ask you about some of the players' futures that are maybe a little bit up in the air. One of them being Troy Parrott, as comments are already flying through on Troy. Troy did an interview recently, I think, with Voya Prime Ball, where he has said from his perspective, all he's wanted since a young boy was to play for Tottenham Hotspur, but he is unsure as to what his future looks like at the football club. From you that's watched this guy from a very, very young age progress and actually get a couple of first team opportunities, but maybe not grasp it to the point of getting regular first team football, where are we in your mind? Because he has come out recently and said, look, I don't know exactly what will happen. I still have 2 more matches here where I'm placed at the moment. Then perhaps international matches too. I'm looking forward to next season. What does next season look like in your mind for Troy Parrott? Where would he be plying his trade, John?
I think Ange certainly has to have a look at him in pre-season. I think there can't be any preconceived ideas that we must just sell him but there will be interest, don't get me wrong. I think the big clubs in the Eredivisie will have seen this boy come over there, do really, really well, put up good numbers, goals and assists, and stats-wise, he's put up really good numbers. So they'll definitely be interested in taking him on a permanent basis from an Ajax, from a Feyenoord, from a Vitesse, one of the bigger PSV, the bigger clubs out there. But I think we have to look at him first. I think Ange has to make a decision, because this will be the first summer that he will count as both homegrown and club trained. And obviously in a window when we're really looking to balance the books with our squad for European competition as well, the fact that Troy is able to play kind of off the wing positions as well as an out-and-out striker makes him an interesting prospect. So I think we have to look at him in pre-season. I would love to, for example, see him start in that game away to QPR and just getting a gauge of kind of where he is against Championship opposition, and in amongst the Spurs first team. I don't think there needs to be a rush to make a decision on him this summer. I think let's have a really good look at him, see how he integrates with the squad, and then take it from there, really. But there will definitely be permanent interest in him. And I think if Tottenham do want to sell him, it would probably be wise to sell him with maybe a low upfront fee, but with a 50% sell-on, because I think he has got the potential, and it is in him, to explode somewhere if given the game time and exposure to first-team football. He's still really young. People see, because he's been around for a long time, because he debuted at Tottenham when he was like 17 in that game at Colchester. It feels like he's been around forever, but he's still really young, 21, 22, obviously in the Ireland squad announced today. So, yeah, I would love nothing more than for him to come back and for him to have a really good pre-season and, make a mark for himself at Tottenham. It's great when you hear a player, to say that his dream is always to play for Tottenham. And I understand earlier in his career there were some issues around some of the people he hung around with away from football, but hopefully this time away has led to him maturing. And, that was the thing that was kind of holding him back before, because I think actually for all the memories I've had of watching the youth team, Troy probably gave me my best ever moment. I watched our academy away at Barcelona in a Youth League game. They hadn't lost at home for about 6 years, and we rocked up with Troy up front, and Troy ran the show, and we beat them 2-0. And it was seen as a big upset for the famous Barcelona, to lose a youth game to this Tottenham team, and Troy ran the show that day. So, his performance that day was something that will always stick with me from an academy point of view, and just how proud I was of the boys that day. So, fingers crossed that Troy gets a chance to show what he can do pre-season, and hopefully he takes it for his sake.
Yeah, amen. Look, from one forward to another, I feel maybe bad categorising this guy as a youth player, because he's obviously developed and has since got some form of regular first-team football at different football clubs. That's Dane Scarlett. John, what does your mystic mind tell you about Dane Scarlett and where he's going to be in the summer, beyond the summer? What club will that be at?
Yeah, I think Dane will go on loan again. I think there's no rush with Dane, contracted till 2026, I think, at the minute. Tottenham love Dane, so I'm not worried about people misconceiving how his loans have been. He took the loan at Portsmouth really, really well. I know his family and agency saw that as a hugely successful loan, getting 40 games under his belt. Obviously, the Ipswich loan didn't work out this year. Ipswich now back in the Premier League, and that was frustrating, because, and I'm sure Tottenham feel frustrated with the assurances Kieran McKenna gave Tottenham about that loan and how involved Dane would be, and that obviously didn't happen. It was Kieran that said, that Dane is one of the best finishers for his age in the age group and had known him from working with England. So he knew what he was getting. It wasn't a surprise for him, Dane. He worked with Dane at England and knew who Dane was. So I think Tottenham were really frustrated with that. I think he'll go out on loan again. And I still have full faith in Dane going on and doing really well. And hopefully one day breaking into Tottenham's first team. I really like Dane. He's hard, and he's a great finisher. I just the right thing to go well for him. And this next one is probably key. I get that and I understand that, but I think if this next loan does go well, then the sound bites and the feelings around him will be hugely positive again.
Yep, listen, great stuff there, John. I'm going to ask you 2 final quick-fire questions on the youth. I've got to get your final 1-minute thought on Timo Werner joining the first team. Sorry, mate. I thought you might have avoided it. You haven't. I've got to ask you about Timo Werner. Look, first.
Go on, Rick. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. Jordan Hussein asks, our youth teams done really well across the season. I'll give you 3. Who are the main standouts that you think should get first team opportunities next season? You've rattled a number of names here tonight. But for you, if I said to you the 3, who would be the 3 that you would love to see get first team football next season under Ange Postecoglou?
Jamie Donley, Tyrese Hall, Mikey Moore.
Okay, fantastic. And Harley at THFC Harley says, who's an academy player, John, that's not been spoken about loads, but you think could be integrated in Ange's system over the next few seasons?
Maybe Leo Black, as I said, because he's got that ability to play as an inverted right back and being comfortable in midfield. I think Leo Black is one that could go under the radar, and by hanging around at Tottenham, because he won't go on loan next year because he's still an under-18s player, he might randomly be given a chance in the European game and grab it with both hands. And it's great to see him now get involved in England setups as well. So I think Leo Black is an underrated one that is, very high potential and one that they really like. Rick, I just want to answer your question on Timo Werner. We got a bit cut off there and I didn't get to answer it. So Timo Werner, is he better than Brian Hill? Yes. Is he maybe better than Manor Solomon? Probably yes. But, you know, it's not free. He's obviously on £165,000 a week. That puts him as our third highest earner at the club. You know, yes, he's very, very good at putting those balls across the goal face. Is that because he's left a little bit unmarked because, you know, opposition players aren't afraid of him shooting? I think that does have to be considered, because I see Sonny, I see Brennan Johnson, I see Kulevetsky being doubled up on that side by, you know, the midfielder that's on the side and the fullback, whereas Timo always seems to be in that space on the far side. Especially when you're watching it from the south stand, you're looking down the pitch, he's there every time, free. I'm not completely convinced on Werner. I don't think he's brilliant. I'm glad we haven't bought him permanently, put it that way. And I'm glad that we're still in the position of strength in that if he does do well, then we can sign him and sign him relatively cheaply. But I do worry about him blocking the pathway of some of our younger players. And having seen Mikey not just be involved in the squad, but come on in 2 games towards the end of the season in the exact same position that we've now signed Werner in. Yeah, I don't think it's great, if I'm being totally honest with you. But look, if Ange likes him and Ange wants to work with him, then, you know, I'm all for it. And let's see. Hopefully Werner, you know, can contribute in a big way, and hopefully does so well that we do sign him permanently.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting point. I think that one is going to definitely divide the fan base. I think, put this politely, maybe because it was announced first, I think that's one of those things where if you've got a couple of big stars in, you know, real genuine game changers, and then you put Timo Werner towards the end of the window, it might be different. But I think the problem Spurs had with that one, John, very quickly, is we knew they had a deadline on that where they had to trigger that, obviously, during a certain time frame. So that probably was always going to be announced towards the start of the summer. And one man I have to close it on that, and I many have picked up on that I haven't asked you about, is Alfie Devine, only because he had such a furore about him, about what this guy could achieve and what he could do at Spurs. And I think, again, hasn't really had the most best of loans this season. Close it on Alfie Devine. Where does the future hold for him? And again, with some of the players being signed, is this again a concern that this may be blocking his development if he was to be able to be successful at Tottenham?
No, I think Alfie still had a good season. I think, you know, you've got to remember, he'd never been on loan before this season. He's been at 2 different clubs, had 2 different experiences. Football is about experiences, gaining exposure, the highs and lows. He had the high of, you know, scoring a 92nd minute winning penalty away to Oxford for Port Vale. Obviously, with Plymouth, he had the high of staying up and staying in the division. And, you know, and obviously there was a few lows along the way in terms of not being selected and that sort of thing. But I think for Alfie, it's been another massive season of progress in terms of transitioning to senior men's football. I think we need to pick the right championship club for him next season. I touched on Queen's Park Rangers earlier. I think that'd be an amazing move for him. But I'm sure there's others that would also be a brilliant move for him. I just think he needs a good championship loan with kind of 40, 45 games under his belt, and then take it from there.
John, it's always a pleasure, mate. Always fascinating. I could talk to you for hours and hours. Your knowledge on the youth is untapped. He's the GOAT of the youth at Tottenham, and what is that to come? John, for those that don't know where to find you, where can they find all of the encyclopedic youth you do have on Tottenham Hotspur?
Yes, I'm on Twitter or X as @LilyWhite_Rose, and the same on Facebook and also Instagram.
Fantastic. And John, I know many will be driving me mad to ask you this question. Is the podcast coming back? Will it ever come back? We know you've got a busy life. I know, mate, again, same as me. It's family, it's kids, it's life. Give everyone an update.
I always do this, and I come on and say it's back next week, it's back in 2 weeks. It will be back. Obviously, this season just gone has been an amazing season. There's lots to review and lots of players to talk to, and, you know, possible interviews to do and that kind of stuff. So at some point it'll be back, and when it is back, it'll be back with a bang, and I'll have some big shows lined up, I'm sure.
John, I'm loving that. Listen, we're making the most of having you on here with these quarterly updates in terms of what is going on at the youth. I think, like, okay, to end it on this point, John, I mean, it's only right I say it's a really, really, really exciting time right now to be looking at our youth. And again, you really raised a clamour on social media for more fans to get down there and really, really get behind the boys. Is that one of the things you do want to see maybe for next season? Because there's no doubt about it that whilst the academy is where it is at the moment in terms of the progression, the style of play, so enlikened to the way the first team are playing, how important is that you'd encourage and ask fans to, if they can, come down and see these boys, because they really, truly do value that support, right?
Yeah, look, all the players I speak to, all their family, all their agents, they all say one thing to me. They would love more Tottenham fans to be at the games, whether that be at Stevenage, when they play at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. If people can get down, the tickets are so cheap, so affordable. It's a great time to take, you know, kids to their first games and to get, you know, the younger support coming through the club. And, tickets are Stevenage are like £5 for the under-21s games for adults and £2 for children. When they're at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, maybe £10 maximum for adults. So I just think it's a phenomenal chance to come and see this really exciting group. And they are a really exciting group, and they're worth your money. They play great football. They're exciting to watch. And I just know the players buzz off it, and it gives them that momentum to push on that a little bit more, knowing they're playing in front of a crowd. And it helps them transition as well. So, we're all hoping these guys become first-team players. Well, getting them used to having a crowd there, getting them used to having people singing their name and supporting them is only going to help them on that journey. So, if you guys can, obviously Spurs players done a great job at bringing more people to know about the players. But the next step is getting people to the ground. And, if we can do that next season moving forward, I would always help from my account to try and push out the links and encourage people to get down there. I know the players and their families are always really thankful for that. So, if anyone can get down there and get, kids down there and all their local football clubs and that kind of thing, please do. And the players always really, really appreciate that.
John, thank you so much. Look, we had the pleasure. John over at Lily White Rose. Please go and check him out. Of course, LilyWhite_Rose. Forget about, no disrespect to them, the Spurs Academy account. John's a man you need to follow. Go and check him out. All of our youth news is where John is. So please go and check him out. Look, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for our watching audience. Over 3,000 of you have watched this live on X, on Instagram, on Facebook and YouTube. We can't thank you enough for all your support. Thank you again for all your comments, for your views and your questions. We'll be back with you very, very soon. But from myself, from the wonderful John Wenham at Lily White Rose, guys, keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on, you Spurs.